I'm Pam with PJ's Glass Creations. Is there a golfer in your life? Then this clock might be perfect for that person. You can get the pattern on my Etsy site, pjsglasscreations.etsy.com, and you can also watch the free tutorial here on YouTube. So let's get creating. I'm actually going to try to make 2 clocks at once. You don't have to do this. But what I did was I started with a piece of blue and white streaky. I think it's a turquoise and white streaky bullseye. And I love this glass because it looks like the sky to me. And what I'm going to do is I measured about 1.5 inches up this way, 1.5 inches up this way. I marked my middle and I kind of just drew a wavy line. And what I'm going to do is cut this into 2 pieces. This piece will be the sky. And then I'm going to put some green that matches the curve here on the bottom. And that will be the putting green or the golf course, I guess you would say. So I'm going to cut this first piece. And you can see that if I do this, I have the exact opposite that I can use for my another clock. So I thought, why not make 2 at once? So I'm going to cut this. And break it. Since it's such a long cut, I'm starting on one end and then going to the other end. So now you can see I have 2 pieces that are fairly similar. And they'll both be sky. Then I have another 5 by 12 piece. That is the green. And I'm going to trace this. This cut I have to be a little more careful with because I need it to match the curve of that other one. So I do have to kind of stay on my line. And if I don't, that's what grinders are for. But it's a lot easier to have it close in the first place. Hopefully that cut's okay. I had a little bit of trouble a little bit of trouble seeing over that camera. Well, I'm going to just demo with the one anyway, so we'll do another green piece later. So obviously I'm going to have to grind up here. But my goal is to grind it and get it perfect so that these 2 pieces will match up. So what I'm going to do is put that like kind of where I want it. And trace it, and then I can see kind of where I need to grind to make this all meet up. So I'm going to go to the grinder and I'll be back in a minute. I did my initial grinding and it fits pretty well, but I am noticing that like right in here I have a little gap. So I think between like here and here I might need to grind just a sliver off. And then probably from here maybe to there, just a sliver off. So all in here, just a sliver. Okay, I'm back, and actually I do have this upside down. So this looks pretty good. If you have a microscopic gap, it's going to fill in because we're going to do a full fuse. And in getting ready for the full fuse, what we are going to do is, is put this on a clear background to make it a little more sturdy. So I have a 5-inch by 12-inch clear, and this should fit right on there. Okay, and you can glue that if you want, so you can take it to the kiln. I'm going to use just a dot of clear Elmers. When you're using any kind of Elmer's glue or something, you don't want to use a lot, just a tiny bit, just enough to get it to the kiln. You don't want the glue doing weird things to your glass. You can use other glue too. You can use a super glue as long as it's not gel. You can use like a Glastac. You could even use hairspray. So I'm going to leave it like that. And the next thing I need to do is make my putting green. So I just drew an irregular shape here. Usually putting greens aren't exactly round. And I'm going to take this again to the grinder and grind it off. I'll be right back. So I ground my piece so it's not as jagged. And I'm going to put this on as well. And I'm keeping everything way to the left side, because on this right side, I'm going to put a clock. Oh, that's a lot of glue. I didn't want that much. Take some of it off. So here's my putting green. And I am going to do a full fuse of just this part. And then later, we're going to add the details like a flag for the golf hole. Actually, we're going to put a golf... Oh, I forgot my golf hole. Just a second. I'm back. You can't play golf without a hole to put the ball in. So what I have here is a black nugget. I know that it's raised up, but once we do a full fuse on this, it will be all even. And if you notice, I have 2 layers here, 3 layers here, and a 4th layer. Actually, it's kind of thick, so almost a 5th layer of glass here. So when I do my full fuse, I need to ramp up slowly, and I need to come down slowly, cool off slowly, so that I don't thermal shock my piece because of all the variation in the layers. But this is ready to go into the kiln for a full fuse. And then the other thing that I also need to put in is the base that this clock will sit on. So this piece that actually broke earlier, these will be together, full fused. And my clock will sit right on it. It's going to be glued on there. And that way it gives it a nice solid base. So these are 2 pieces that are 2 by 12. Boy, this comes out fast. I need to fix that. And I'm going to glue these together. And this will also go in for a full fuse at the same time. So when my fusing is done, I'll be back to show you the next steps. And actually, if you notice, this doesn't quite, my one piece is a little bit bigger than the other piece down here. It's not going to matter. By the time we do a full fuse, you won't be able to tell. So we're just going to leave it as is. Both these pieces will go in for a full fuse, and then we'll go on to the next step. My base for my golf clock is out of the kiln. This part here that was 4 layers is nice and smooth now, nice and flat. Eventually we will put a golf flag up here and a golf ball on my putting green. But right now I want to get ready for the clock. So I have a template, and it is included in the directions of this pattern if you buy it on my Etsy site. I made it about 3.8 inches because my hands, and my clock is about 4 inches from end to end. And I am going to be using this wave mold, which is Slumpy's, I'll find where it's written. Slumpy's 7800. It's a 12-inch wave mold. I know there's other wave molds out there. Just make sure that it's going to fit your clock. And this, let's see if I can get my camera a little higher. This fits my 12-inch piece. It looks like it's going off here, but it will round off right here. So it'll be placed about right here. And the reason that's important is my golf queen part's going to be where it indents, and my clock is going to be where the hump is. And the reason it needs to be where the hump is that I don't want my hands to get stuck going around by hitting the sides if it's in that divot. So it's going to be on the hump. And the reason I have it on my mold now is because I want to place my clock, the face of my clock, so that it's right on the top of that hump. And I put a little bit of tape on the back just to hold this. I also poked a hole right in the middle here. And the reason for that is I'm going to use some enamel and mark the center so I know later where to drill my hole. And I'm using Colors for Earth. It is a black concentrated enamel. And I put some just on a little scrap of glass. Probably put way too much. That's kind of how it came out, so I'll have to try to get it back in the bottle. And I'm just going to mark my middle, which won't show later because we're going to drill that out. And I'm going to use this dotting tool, which I got on Amazon. And once I put enamel on it, I kind of tap it just to make sure I get any excess off. Otherwise, you tend to get a big old blob, which likes to spread. And I'm going to work my way around the clock and make my dots about as even as I can. I'm not going to worry if they're not exactly even because I can go back later after it's dry and either scrape away any excess enamel, like that one's not quite a circle, or I can add enamel if I need to. And there you have it. I'm going to carefully take this off. Try not to mess up my dots. And you can see here are my hour markings for my clock, and right there is that little mark for the center. So I'm going to put this in the toaster oven at 250 degrees for about 10 minutes so that this can set and I'm not going to be worried about smearing it. And then we'll come back and finish it up. My clock is out of the oven and these dots are dry so they won't smear anymore. They all look pretty good except this one is kind of an oval instead of a circle. So I'm just going to use a toothpick, round that one up a little bit. And I think the rest of them look pretty good. And the last thing we need to do before it goes back in the kiln is to add the golf flag. So I have a 2mm stringer. You can use a 1mm if that's all you have. I'm sure that would be fine too. And I'm going to see about how high I want to make it. I think I'm going to have it about that tall. And I'm just going to break a little piece off, test it out, so it'll be about right there. I have my flag, which is just a scrap of red. So that will be about like that. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. And then I'll be putting a golf ball here. So all I need to do is glue all of this. I am using an Elmers clear glue. Make sure it's, if you're using something else like a super glue, make sure it is not a gel. But this Elmers is okay kind of as a gel. And if you noticed, I glued my whole stringer. Stringers tend to go a little wonky if the whole thing is not glued. Okay, there's my flag. And my golf ball is going to be here. This guy hit a pretty good shot. And we're almost done. This just needs to go in for a tack fuse. Then I'm going to slump it and we'll attach it to our base. By the way, if you remember earlier in the video, we made a base. So this is what it looked like. I actually thought later I could have even made it out of this green, and that would have looked good too. But either way, it's fine. So we're gonna put this in for a tack fuse, and then we'll kind of do a few things to it before we slump it, and then attach it to the base like I said, and it'll be done. The base for the clock is out of the kiln, and this is just raised just a little bit. You can still feel the ball and the flag. Everything else is smooth. Actually, I can feel my little marks for my enamel here. I think that's okay though. And there's my little mark. That's where I'm going to drill a hole. So the next thing I'm going to do is use my diamond bit to drill a hole. I have a drill press that I'm going to be using. But if you are using it, or if you're trying to drill it by hand with a regular drill, first of all, you have to do it underwater. And the other thing is that if you are holding your drill, and this, pretend this is my drill bit. It's a, I don't know what, there's an enamel on my pencil, but pretend this is your drill bit. You're going to start out with your drill bit at an angle like this. Make sure it's underwater. And then you are going to gradually, after you get a groove here that holds your drill bit in place, you're going to gradually put your drill bit up so it's straight. And then you're going to drill all the way through. Make sure that you're letting your drill bit do the work. If you force it, you can crack your piece. Also make sure it's not dry. If it's dry, the friction will heat up your piece and you can crack your piece that way. So I'm going to drill this, and then we're going to put it on the mold. I'm back. I have the hole ready for the shaft of my clock. If you can see that very well. And I'm going to put this on my mold. And again, this was a mold from Slumpy's. It says SM7800. And this wave mold, I think I mentioned it earlier, but I want to make sure that my clock is over on this side where the hump is, because I want my clock mechanism hidden behind that hump, and I also want my hands out in front of that hump. If they were inside this groove or divot, the hands might get hung up on the sides as they were going around. So make sure. Also make sure that your piece is nice and clean. I cleaned mine with some a water, 50-50 water alcohol mix. So I'm going to put this in for a slump with the clock part on the hump, and then we will be ready to assemble. I'm just making sure that my clock is centered on that hump. All right. Can't wait to see how this clock turns out. My clock is out of the kiln. You can see it has a nice wave to it. So when it's finished, it will actually stand up. I know you're looking at it from the top, but you can see the wave to it here, and it will stand up on its own, but we are actually going to add this base to it that we made. This was the piece we did earlier. That was two 2-inch by 12-inch pieces just fused together on a full fuse. And that way it'll be a lot more secure. Next thing we need to do is actually add the clock mechanism. And this particular one came with a hanger. We don't want the hanger because it's going to be on a base, so we're just not going to use that at all. And you do need a 1-inch, actually, let me see what this is. Oh, that one's just like a 1/2 inch. You need a minimum of a 1/2 inch shaft. You could probably do a 3/4 inch shaft. It might work a little bit better than this one. My clock is out of the kiln. You can see it has a nice wave to it. And the next thing we're going to do is add a clock mechanism. So I have this clock mechanism. I believe this shaft is 1/2 inch. That is the minimum that you need. You would probably be better off having a 3/4 inch shaft, but I do not have one right now. So we're gonna try this one. And the reason we need a longer shaft, even though this is only going through 6 millimeters of glass, you can see here that there's a gap between the glass and the clock mechanism. So that is why you would need the longer shaft. So you put your shaft in there and you add the gold washer. And then the next thing you're going to do is put this nut on. And your clock mechanism may be different than this one, but they're all fairly standard, but just follow the directions that come with your particular mechanism. And I am holding my finger on the back on the little wheel, this little wheel here that you can use to change the time, because if I am twirling this, it makes that turn too, and you don't make any progress. So this is nice and secure now. And the first thing we're going to do is put on the hour hand. And the hour hand should just snap pretty securely on there. Next, we need to put the minute hand on. And I do need to tell you, these hands have a plastic coating on them. So make sure you're taking that off. If you notice on my minute hand, there are 2 flat edges. These flat edges need to line up with the flat edges on your shaft. And then you push it down securely. And then, to me, this is the hardest part. There's this itty bitty washer. And you have to get this itty bitty washer on there perfectly level. Because if it's not level, then it won't thread right. And see, it didn't thread right there. Oh, there we go. And I can already see it's not level. There we go. I think I need to put my finger on that wheel there. Okay, that's nice and secure. And this particular one has a second hand. They don't all have second hands. If they do, typically that just snaps on. Now I need to make sure that my hands didn't get bent in the process. I'm gonna move this one up a little bit, because if this minute hand comes around and gets hung up on that hour hand, your clock is gonna get stuck and it's not gonna tell the correct time. So you might need to bend your hands just a little bit. But I think this one's pretty good. Once I put a battery in, it'll be good to go. Okay, all of them clear. And the last thing we're going to do is attach my clock to the base. So I am going to put a bead of glue all the way along this bottom edge. And if I were you, I would test this edge first. Make sure that it sits flush. Make sure you don't have any high spots that you need to grind down. Take the time and do it properly. I did test this one first and it does sit very flush, so I'm not worried about it. And we put it on the base, let it dry, put a battery in, and the clock is done. Perfect for the golfer in your life. Might have to give this one to my husband. So here's the finished product. After it's dry, I'll show you a better picture of it. I hope you had fun making this golf clock. If you did, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And you can visit me on Etsy, pjsglasscreations.etsy.com, and also you can find me on Facebook. Thanks for joining me.